For over 20 years, Eric Nate's Euro Hockey has been helping hockey players of all ages develop their individual skills and improve on all aspects of their game. Through structured drills and innovative training equipment, Eric Nate's Euro Hockey's intense on-ice instruction challenges each student to be the best at their ability. Find a hockey clinic or summer camp that is right for you today at nateshockey.com. That's Nates hockey.com. Eric Nate's Euro Hockey, train to be the best.
And welcome into the RinkWise podcast. I am your host, Evan Marinofsky, joined today by the wonderful Patrick Donnelly. Pat, what's up?
Not much. I'm feeling wonderful after Patriots win and seeing the two sucky offenses they might have gone against last night. We're recording this on Tuesday. So good prep hockey, good high school hockey, good playoff football here in New England. Everything's coming up.
Yeah, it's funny. I was at Arlington, Hingham, which we'll get to in a bit, which was 5:20 on Sunday. I was like, ooh, we're cutting this a little close. But game wrapped up. Everybody get out of there. Home by 8. So no big deal. But yeah, it's a good time. It's funny though, for the prep and high school seasons, it's the dog days.
It is.
These are the dog days. And I don't have a problem with that. Like I enjoy it. We're settling into a groove here. Tournaments are pretty much done for now.
It is our job after all.
It is our job. And then we're not, nothing too strenuous. We'll start with girls prep. Let's dive into girls prep, Pat. You have a new, your rankings actually have not come out at the time of recording, but they will be out once you are all listening to this. I believe there's a new number 1. Am I right about this?
There is a new number 1. So it's been a while since our rankings, just the way the holidays fell. And, last week there wasn't really enough to do a new set of rankings after, the only teams in play were 6 at the New Year's prep puck drop. So we'll have a lot to get to in this week's ranking. And we'll start off, Wilson jumps up to number 1. They're rolling right now. We talked about the New Year's prep puck drop last week. And then they followed up beating Tabor, who was number 6 at the time. River Grady played really well in net. I wasn't there, just from hearing from, email. River Grady had a good game in net. Zola Pikarski had a hat trick. She's really come on strong of late. And they're number 1 in the JSPR. So the math agrees with me. The eye test and box scores kind of all add up. And, they leapfrog from 3-1. So that leaves Loomis Chafee at number 2. They, smoke Milton. They smoke Berkshire. Annie Schwartz has been sensational this season. She has a point in every single game. Hat trick and assist against Milton. 2 goals and an assist against Berkshire. They're doing this without Lindsay Stepnowski these last 2 games. She's at the U18 Women's Worlds with Team USA. And Loomis is 5th in the JSPR, which is a little surprising. I thought they'd be higher. But, that's when the math doesn't agree with me. I was
gonna say, people like Pat, people like you and I, who are journalism majors, usually the math doesn't agree with us.
No,
people forget.
Well, I was talking about this, so again, not to talk about football. This is a hockey show, but I'm watching the Patriots the other night with some friends, and one of my friends, a little newer to football, asking about like Pro Football Focus and like doesn't matter, and I'm like, well, you get the people who say it doesn't matter at all. You get the people who like swear by it. And really all it is a tool. If it's your entire argument, it's very flawed. And if you're using it just to supplement some things here and there, some things that matter, that's where you get it. And obviously the JSPR is what matters on February 28th or whatever the day is. But right now it's just a tool. It's supplanting our arguments.
As long as, you know what it is, Pat, as long as when it supports your argument, you use it. When it doesn't support your argument, you don't, you leave it out. That's what you got to do. Leave it out.
Yeah.
And the rest of the top 5 shuffled for you as well, right?
Yeah, it was kind of just a little bit of waterfall other than, Loomis, staying at 2. Phillips Andover moved up 1. They beat Governors 6-0. They beat Choate 5-3, beat Brooks 6-0. All without Maggie Averill, who's captaining the Team USA at the Worlds. Sarah Powers and Caroline Averill have been absolutely insane to start 2026. Powers had 2 goals and 3 assists against Govs. Caroline Averill had 2 goals and 2 assists against Govs. They followed up with a goal and assist each against Choate. And then Powers had 3 assists and Averill 2 goals and an assist against Brooks. It's pretty good. That's a pretty good 3-game stretch. Lily McInerney has goals in 3 straight. Jacqueline Louis, who's a new player for them, a youngster coming through, she has a 3-game point streak. So everything's kind of going in Andover's favor right now. They're number 2 in the JSPR. And then we kind of buried the lead here with number 1 falling. Nobles drops to 5. Dexter leapfrogs them to 4. Dexter beat Nobles. If it weren't for just Andover, Loomis, and Williston laying waste to everybody else, Dexter would have been higher. And you also have to account for Nobles didn't have Lily Bromley, Ava DeCourcy, Catherine McCool, who are at the U18 Women's Worlds. And I'm assuming because, that game was last Wednesday. Averill and Stepnowski weren't playing for, Phillips, Andover, and Loomis, respectively. So, again, I wasn't there. I'm just safely assuming that those 3 weren't in the lineup for Nobles if they were all with Team USA. But, Nobles is still a great team even without those 3 players. So that's nothing to take away from the win for Dexter. 3-2 win. Evelyn Doyle had a goal and assist. Leah Hay for 2 assists. And they've been playing a really stingy, brand so far. And then they followed up with a 5-0 win over Milton. With another 2 assist game for Leah Hafer. They're 3rd in the JSPR. They're still undefeated. They're, I think, one of 2 undefeated teams left. It's them and Exeter. So yeah, Dexter's it's a similar position as last year where they're kind of humming right now, and it's how good are you? And last year they come up with that dramatic upset over Nobles. This year it's another dramatic upset over Nobles. So we'll see how they kind of fare. St. Paul's, it'll be a good test for both teams on Wednesday, and Dexter will kind of get more into the meat of the schedule, and we'll learn a lot about them.
You hit on St. Paul's a little bit. They're a team that seems to be starting off the new year well.
Yeah, St. Paul's, and take advantage of your schedule. 8-0 win over Vermont Academy. They fell behind to Lawrenceville 2-0. They came back and won 3-2. Maddie Allen scored. Cadence Crowley scored. Miley Glanzer scored the game winner. She also had a goal against Vermont Academy. And then they smoked Hotchkiss 11-3. Erin Flaherty had a hat trick. They had 7 different goal scorers. Tess Mulcairn, Maddie Allen had 2 each. So they're humming right now on offense, and they have the highest scoring offense in prep right now. In total goals, 8th in the JSPR, so they'd be in the Elite 8 right now. I'll be at Dexter and St. Paul's on Wednesday. I'm pretty eager to see how St. Paul's does there. I'm eager to see Dexter for the first time this season. Can the goaltending, can the defense hold up against an offense like that that's really getting contributions from everywhere?
A game that you were at, though, was Exeter and Cushing. This was what? Was this Friday night, I think? Friday night?
Last Wednesday.
Wednesday.
No, it was Friday night.
Yeah, I was going to say,
right.
Friday you went to Govs and
yes, Wednesday
Andover.
Andover. I chose wrong. I was between Govs and Andover and Dexter and Nobles.
If you went to Dexter Nobles, it would have been like a 10-0 game. That's how it always works out, right?
There's no way to win.
No. But Exeter and Cushing was pretty crazy.
Yeah, Exeter comes back into the top 10. They're 9th. I can't say enough about that top line. I talked about it early in the season after they played Govs. We talked about it going into the season. We probably talked about it all last season, where Paisley Meyer, Maria Gray, Erin Sears I think they're all top 10 in points in prep, at least as of yesterday. And Meyer had 2 straight 4-goal games to open 2026. 4 goals against North Yarmouth Academy, 4 goals against Cushing. Maria Gray had 2 assists against Cushing to eclipse 100 career points. So congratulations to her. Man, that game against Cushing was wild. Cushing started pretty well, and then all it took was a pretty dominant shift from the top line to flip things in Exeter's favor. And it was kind of the floodgates. It was, I think, 4-1 at 1 or 5-1, I think. Yeah, 5-1 at the end of the second. Cushing looked pretty dead, not gonna lie, but I gotta say, props to them for coming out flying in the third. They scored 2 quick goals. Maddie Soderquist and Stella Hunter. Stella Hunter had a really good game, playing a lot of minutes on D. Someone who's a versatile skater for Cushing, who's without some defensemen last week. Sadie Bellissimo was sick, so she wasn't in net for the Exeter game. They're without Brooke Fallon. She tore her ACL. Julia Lambert went down on like the second shift of the Exeter game. Cushing, just terrible luck with injuries right now. And that, probably explains why, we're sitting here last week saying, they're better than they've shown. And it just seems to be rotten luck at a bad time. So, if that turns it around, we know they certainly have the skill to get hot at any time.
Yeah, and it's tough to see like the torn ACL. I mean, that is just awful. Especially, you know, such a short season. It's always bad, obviously.
Yeah.
Groton's an interesting team because that's one that's always like on the verge of the top 10 or in at the bottom. What do you make of them right now?
Yeah, Groton's interesting. Like you just said, you know, they beat Newhampton 2-0. Zoe Smith scored, Rose Fisher scored, Nora Wilson played well with a 20 save shutout. They did it without Tina Scalise, who's at the U18 Women's Worlds. And then they go and they lose to Newhampton, the BBNN 1-0. So that's a game where you probably lose your kind of heart and soul, you know, play driver like a Scalise. You probably miss her, but, you know, they're number 10 in the JSPR. You know, the thing's always kind of been the supporting cast without Scalise, and, you know, you see it step up in one game and then, you know, the offense kind of dries out the next game. So I'm eager to kind of get my eyes on Groton, you know, soon here. Hopefully there's a good matchup. I haven't like looked too far ahead in the schedules, but Groton's one I'm eager to see with my own eyes to see, you know, if things are kind of matching up with the box scores.
Anybody else outside the top 10 that you're taking a look at, interested in?
Yeah, there are a bunch. I'll touch quickly on Tabor too, by the way. They're 8th. They're going to be 8th in this week's rankings. They're, you know, lost 5-1 to Wilson. Sophia Nardelli with the lone goal. She's having a pretty good sophomore year, but, you know, it's kind of that thing with Tabor where, you know, I heard they played a lot better than the 5-1 indicated, and it was kind of just, you know, ran out of gas at the end, and things get away from you as the score gets up. It's kind of that boat we talked about at the Patsy Chaoten where, you know, can you and kind of like we said a little bit of Cushing last week too, like, can you flip one of these games against the team that's higher than you in the JSPR, you know, our rankings? Not that those matter much on the actual ice sheet, but, you know, can you flip one of those games? Can you find some consistency on offense? Because that's kind of been their Achilles heel in those Andover games. This against Williston, you know, ton of chances, but they can't break through until late, and they're kind of out of it anyways. So Tabor's one more inside the top 10 I'm interested in. And then, you know, outside the top 10, still got my eye on Govs. You know, it wasn't a good score for them against Andover. I thought they played better than a 6-0 final indicate. You know, they were in it for the first 2 periods, and then just things snowball for you at the end. You know, Andover was clearly the better team, but, you know, Govs has, you know, legit top line, good top D pair. Liz Long's obviously a good goalie. I've been impressed with their second line's ability. You know, the 2 times I've seen them to kind of, you know, bring energy, force turnovers, kind of flip the script a little bit. So still got my eye on them. They're 11th in the JSPR. You know, Rivers 1-2-1 since the holiday break. You know, kind of struggled at the New Year's prep puck drop. They bounced back with a rout of Brooks last week. They're still kind of in the mix. But you know, we talked about Cushing. I'm really interested in Choate, Thayer, and Canterbury. Choate, you know, they beat Frederick Gunn. They lost to Andover 5-3, but it was another kind of tough game they gave Andover, at least according to the box score. I wasn't there. 5-3. Seems like they gave them a tough game. They lost them, I think, 1-0 at the Patsy Chaoten. So, you know, they're kind of like last year we talked about Tabor, where they're like, I think Choate right now is 3-3-1. Tabor's record last year wasn't dazzling, but they were always just freaking in it against these good teams. And so they're one kind of, you know, along those lines I've got my eye on. They're 12th in the JSPR, which, you know, for a 3-3-1 record, that says a lot to be kind of that high in the JSPR, where it doesn't jump off the page that much. I think if you look at their opponent's winning percentage, it's highest or second highest in prep. Thayer, you know, they take care of Austin Prep and Portsmouth Abbey for, you know, those teams respectively. That Thayer matchup was kind of a pretty good litmus test for them. And Thayer takes care of business. They have the skill, I think, to make a move here in January and February. They're 15th in the JSPR. Is that enough to get into do they have enough time or what have you to get into the Elite 8? I don't know, but I think there'll be a factor here down the stretch. And Canterbury, we'll see. They're not in the top 16 of the JSPR, but they're creeping up there in the RPI. I think they'd be, you know, number 1 outside the top 16 right now, so 17. But, you know, 7-4-0. Wouldn't be surprised to see their name pop up in the JSBR at some point. They've got a somewhat favorable schedule here coming up over the next few weeks. Like, and it's not like, you know, pushovers. It's, you know, Choate, Frederick Gunn, couple others, and those are games that could go either way. And if you pick up a couple of those, given how well the algorithm thinks of Choate, like those wins like that could reflect really well for Canterbury. So they're just one I've got my eye on. They've got a chance to make a move here, I think, along with Sayre.
For sure. And I think it's funny, like we'll transition to boys here. When I look at the boys prep scene, and I know that, like I've said this to you 1,000 times, I hate when people say, oh, the parity this year. Oh, I love the parity. I always feel like that's a cop-out. Like, make a point, take a stand, like pick a team. This boys prep season, man, I was thinking about this walking out of St. Mark's on Saturday. Tabor beat St. Mark's, which we'll get to in a second. But like I saw that Belmont Hill had lost to Sebs. Sebs went into Bell Hill and got a huge 5-2 win, which is a big ass win for them. And it kind of hits at the point of like, it's all over the place this year on the boys' side.
Yeah.
It's, the top 10 is constantly changing. There's always a new team jumping in every week at the number 10 or number 9 spot. Like Tabor is having a fantastic year, and Canterbury and Loomis and all these teams that you kind of didn't expect are in there. And there are other teams too that have had a little bit of struggles. Cushing's a team that seems to be struggling right now on the boys' side. They're 7-6, and I think they're like 24th in RPI, and they're outside of the top 16 in JSPR. And like that should change, but it's just a weird year where like Brunswick fell out of my top 10 recently. Holderness fell out of the top 10 last week. Like these are teams that are all going to be in it, and I'm assuming are going to make a hard push the last month and a half here going into the Elite Eight. But just the parity, and again, I hate saying that because it's so boring. But like, it hasn't been a boring year. It's been one of those years where like anyone 8 through 25 can beat anybody, and it's like you just don't. It's a coin flip in these games.
Yeah, it's really interesting on the girls' side, like because the parity thing feels like a cop out, and it feels a lot like last year, I think, where, and I could be misremembering, but right now, if I'm just handicapping things, 1 through 5 feels pretty cut and dry. Those 5 teams: Williston, Andover, Dexter, Nobles, Loomis. And Dexter, could, depending on how things fall, it could just be those those other 4, and Dexter's kind of 5th. But I think those are the top 5 teams. Whatever configuration you want to put them in at the end of the season, so be it. They're gonna shuffle. I don't think the top 5 is going to change much more than those. So then you get into the Tabor, Exeter, St. Paul's, and Deerfield. If I'm handicapping it, it's 3 spots for those 4 teams, and then you get into the Groton, Govs, Choate, Cushing, Rivers, Thayer, Taft, and even Canterbury, hell, even Frederick Gunn. Who else? And it's just like kind of that rotating door of like, who's going to be sneaking to the JSPR, or who can, if you're going by the numbers right now, like it's not a lot separates Deerfield and St. Paul's for that last spot, and then you get into a little bigger drop between Deerfield and Groton, and then it's that next tier of Groton, Govs, Choate, Cushing, and then Rivers too, and then you drop off to Thayer and Taft. So it feels like there's some tiers kind of emerging here, but I'm really interested to see, with that 10 through 15 spot, all right, are those teams just in the JSPR because their math puts them in the JSPR? And obviously, like, yes, of course, dummy, that's why they're pictured on the list. Or does Groton or Govs have a legit shot at the Elite Eight? Or are they just jockeying for small school tournament positioning? So again, we'll kind of learn here over the next month, but it's like those top 5, those kind of next 4. I think Deerfield is a lot better than 9th in the JSPR. I'm just kind of interested to see how much they can jump, if at all, here. And then you get into that second tier where it's just like you said in boys prep. It's kind of that revolving door. What's going to happen here? Are any of these teams actually legit contenders to sneak into the Elite Eight, or are we just playing for seeding here? I'm really interested to find out over the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, like I'm looking at the boys JSPR right now. Avon's 1, St. Mark's 2, Salisbury, Tabor, Dexter. That's the top 5. I'm not convinced that's going to be the top 5 come the end of the year. I'm not. I have Dexter as the number 1 team still. There are number 2 in the RPI. Avon is 1 in both of the RPI and JSPR, and I think Avon's going to be there at the end as well. But like St. Mark's, Tabor, Salisbury, Salisbury I assume is in it. St. Mark's and Tabor I think both have a little more to prove. St. Mark's sort of I think has the better all around team, but Tabor just beat them. So like they're in there as well. And then Canterbury's at 6, Loomis at 7. Those are teams. Govs is at 8 right now. And so those are 3 teams that you didn't expect, or at least I didn't expect to be in it right now, and they are. And you have teams like Andover, Hotchkiss, Kimball Union. That's 9 through 11. You expect Kimball Union's 5 in RPI, 11 in JSPR. I still think they're better than what JSPR is giving them credit for. And then you have Belmont Hill, Holderness, Kent Choate, St. Paul's to round it out. Like Cushing isn't in there. And I think Bell Hill's an interesting one, Pat, because Bell Hill's like, they're so good, but they're young and they're inconsistent. And you see it in these results from game to game. And so obviously JSPR doesn't account for age of players. I don't think it does.
No nuance. That's why it's cool. It's additive.
That's right. That's right. But like, so when I look at the boys JSPR, like this is going to look very different when we're sitting here on February 13th. I expect this to change a lot. And that's the interesting thing where like when I'm making the top 10 every week, it's like, I think Dexter's the number 1 team in the region. I haven't hid that. Avon's right there. I think Salisbury and KUA are right there. And then it's, St. Mark's is in there as well. And then it's a lot of who's going to fill in those spots after them. And that's what's going to make it the most interesting is who's going to get in there. I mean, Canterbury right now looks like they could do some damage.
Yeah. I don't know if you feel the same way on boys, and it's a weird way to describe it on the girls' side. It's predictable until it isn't, if that makes sense. Like New Year's prep puck drop. I could have told you Wilson was probably going to run the field. I didn't see Rivers going winless. So that's like predictable and not predictable. And then, like those top 5 teams, pretty much how it shook out in our preseason. Dexter was 6, so now they're in the top 5. So, but then you get into, like we talked about, that next tier. And like you said, for boys, where who the hell knows what's going to happen from 6 through 16 or 6 through 10 or whatever. So, or it's like, you go through your scores every weekend as you do your rankings or whatever. And it's like, boom, boom, would have seen that. And then there's like, whoa, one that like really just punches you in the mouth. And you're like, how the hell did that happen? So that's kind of the way
every day in boys. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Every time there's games, it's like, oh my God. So I feel like I don't have usually we're guessing scores, we're guessing teams. This year I'm like, hands up, man. I don't know.
Do you want to skate fast? For 50 years, Laura Stam instructors have taught youth players to pros how to skate correctly, powerfully, and fast. Players who attend Laura Stam power skating programs learn how to skate fast by learning how to execute every maneuver in hockey. They become powerful, stable, efficient, and explosively fast skaters. If you can't wait for a clinic, join our subscription skills video service, and we'll show you the skills taught at our clinics in an easy-to-use video format with training plans to guide your training. Register or subscribe now at laurastam.com. That's LauraStamm.com. You can learn to skate fast.
Well, you've touched on a couple of these things already. Let's get to boys prep. Tabor, they're legit. They took down St. Mark's.
Yeah, I mean, I was really excited for this game. For St. Mark's, it was one of their first. I mean, they played Canterbury and beat them 8-2, which is aged nicely for them. But Tabor was one of their first real tests after that Canterbury game, and St. Mark's gets out to a 2-0 lead. I'm like, in the first, I'm like, all right, this game, St. Mark's might blow them out of the rink, and Tabor was down Ethan Travis, and they go on to win. They had a fantastic, they played really, really well. Vinny Durso was outstanding in net for them. And one thing that impressed me, like Liam Kaelher had 2 goals in a shift that really turned the tide for them. Alex Zavik, Colvin Callahan, John Shaughnessy. Shaughnessy had the winner. What really stunned me about Tabor, and I didn't know this, I saw them at St. Paul's Jamboree, but that's a scrimmage. Really good defensively. And what's going to be really tough for teams playing them is you get Durso in net, who's hard on his own to beat. And then you have, defensemen like Owen Carter, Marcelo Martinelli, Alex Zavik, Oliver Benoit, who I think is criminally underrated as a really good shutdown and sometimes two-way defenseman. And you got to get through them. St. Mark's might have the best offense in prep. It's probably them or Dexter. And Tabor did a great job of not letting them to inside ice. Now, it was mid-January, early January. St. Mark's had played the night before. some teams don't have their legs. That happens. But Tabor's team defense and how well they defended, that's a scary thing. Like I just said, I don't know how about the top 5, and Tabor's in the top 5 for rankings and for JSPR right now. They might stay. They might stay, or at the very least fall to like 7 or 8. But they're in there. I mean, that's a really hard team to play against, and their schedule doesn't get any easier. They're gonna have a tough road coming up here in the next month and a half. But what I saw what they were able to do, and I also give a lot of credit to a kid like Colvin Callahan. I loved him at Zavarian. He had a good year last year, and he's breaking out this year. He's their top point getter. So like, Tabor's an interesting team. They're also older. A lot of these teams, like Govs, Canterbury, Loomis, they're older teams, and so I think you're seeing that. And this might be a way that prep is developing. We talk a lot about talent leaving, going to juniors, kids leaving early. After those high-end teams like your Dexters and your St. Mark's and your Salisbury's, it's the older teams that are going to fill in the gaps right after them. And I think you're seeing that right now with teams like Canterbury and Govs and Tabor. And I think, just going back to Tabor, like it's a good team. I like, they have staying power. That's not just a one-off game.
Yeah. We've talked a lot of a big picture already, and not to sidetrack us with a little more big picture stuff, but that sounds like you're talking about college hockey right there. Like, you got your BUs, your Penn States, your Michigans who are super young, and then you got your Western Michigans filling in and winning the damn natty. Like,
I think that's the big thing, and I think it's an interesting development in prep. And older teams have always had
it's not new.
Leg up. It's not new, but I think it's more defined this year than it's ever been. Where these and college coaches always say, like, I don't want first round picks. I don't want to recruit second round picks because those guys are going to be 1 and dones or 2 and dones. I want a 5th who's going to stay for 3 years or potentially 4. And I think that, I always bring this question up. It'd be a really interesting story of like, if you were starting a prep team and you had like a number 1 pick, who are you picking in prep? And a lot of people would say like a high end 2010, like a Jack Quealy or someone. And it's like, yeah, like maybe that is the kind of guy you want to start your team with. But if he leaves the next year, then you had him for 1 year. And I don't know what he's going to do. I'm just using him as an example. But like, you do want guys that are going to stay 3 and 4 years. And I look at a team like Belmont Hill. They lost Tavares. They lost Sloper. They lost Bosco. And it's like, man, if they had those guys, what that team would be able to do. So I think it's an interesting thing to track in prep where, these older teams are having a lot of success.
Yeah. And then like, you even get like every school is different. Some have a middle school, some don't. But like, you got a Rivers who had those kids like Myers, Sears, and Pandolfo for more than a couple of years. If everyone's different, but maybe you get those young kids for 2, 3, 8th grade, freshman, sophomore, but that's neither here nor there.
The Rivers kids are a great example of like, because they're Rivers, they got to play as 8th graders. If they're most anywhere else, they're probably, maybe they're playing as 8th graders, but they're behind a bunch of seniors. And that wasn't the case there because they got to play. So it always blows my mind when people don't go to a place where they're going to play. Like, go where you're going to play as a young person. I know that I'm going off track here, but it blows me away when people bury themselves down the depth chart just to say they go to a certain school. I never get it. Never understood it.
A little more big picture here. St. Mark's, are they legit?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people rag on St. Mark's' schedule. It's the schedule. It is what it is.
The schedule is your schedule.
Your schedule's your schedule. I'll defend them because I want the cover to age well. That's the reason. I will say though, they're so deep up front, and even the other day against Tabor, like guys like Evan Nee, Will Manchuso, Caden Pellegrino, like those guys are going to get it done. There have been questions on D. Like, do they have the horses on defense? Are they going to get the goaltending? Alves Thomas and Julian Herrera have been solid this year, but they're still younger guys at the prep level. So I think it is a question mark on D and in net, just, proving it, so to speak. And that's going to be their thing, improving defensively and being better defensively and moving pucks up better. But yeah, I think they're legit for being a top 6 team in prep. I had them, I think, at 3 this week. They could have went anywhere. Like if Salisbury had won the game sheet prep cup, I would have probably moved St. Mark's down a little more and Salisbury up. But it is what it is. Like I do think St. Mark's is still legit. I'm not a naysayer.
And so you get to Salisbury and KUA. They were at the game sheet prep cup this weekend. A mouthful.
Yeah. Whoa, say that 5 times.
We gotta workshop some of these names here. But hey, KUA, they lost to Northwood, beat Nichols and South Kent. You had Salisbury, they lose to Culver in the championship, but they beat South Kent and Frederick Gunn. What did you make of their weekends?
Yeah, I was not able to make it up there. Usually that's always something I try to get up to. But just judging off the scores and from what I heard, they both had good weekends. Both Salisbury and KUA. Obviously, KUA loses their first game. Salisbury loses in the championship. I guess Culver's really good this year, which is awesome for them. I think one of my big stories with KUA is Josh Phillips. I've talked about him a number of times this year. Senior, uncommitted still, scored 5 times, had a hat trick in one of the games. To me, like, I think they're going to go as far as a guy like him takes them. And then Salisbury's an interesting team because every year I've been in this job, Salisbury starts out kind of slow and then they find it in the second half and then they sneak in as an Elite 8 team, like, 6 or 5 seed or whatever. This year it's different. They're much deeper than I've ever seen them up front. This is going back to 2022. Luke Walkoskis, Elliot Bibeau-Rivard, Luca Desjardins, Landon Klein, Grayson Espinche. Then you have guys like, Elliot Watson and Zach Gill on D, who are phenomenal two-way defenders, and Angus Proctor, Nate Burlock. Like, to me, that Salisbury team is deeper than I've seen in years past. And I think that's why they're going to be a high seed come the end. Like, that, I'm going to try to go see them at Cushing on Wednesday night. They are deep, and I think that's going to be a team. And Salisbury every year they won a bunch of New England championships, so like it's not a sleeper team, but that's a really good team, and they're deep. So I think they're going to be a team that's set up for success come the end of the year.
And we touched on it a lot already, but the parity, you had a note on that here. We had Sebs beating Bell Hill. We talked about 8 through 25 already, all the shuffling and all that. And it's, all the same thing on the girls' side a lot. But any parting thoughts on the parity this year?
Yeah, I think we hit on a big thing with the older teams. Like, I think that's something that I need to look at more is like, going into a season are these older teams. And I even look at and they're not older, but like Nobles had a really good weekend this past weekend. They beat not weekend, but they beat Sebs and Thayer. Like, Nobles was 3-7. Now they're 5-7. And you have teams like Williston that are, 4-6-2, but are really hard out. They lose to Berkshire, they lose to Canterbury. Like, it's just so interesting. Like, when I go down the RPI of these teams, Govs, Andover, Holderness, Choate, Kent, like Brunswick's 19, they're going to go back up. Thayer's 22, they should be better. Cushing should keep moving up. Berkshire's 9-6, and they're 26 in the RPI. Like, it's all over the place, and I think that's one of the tough parts. Like, as we forecast and project and rank every week, is it's just so unexpected. God only knows what my predictions are going to look like come the playoffs when we predict like every game. That should be a trip. That's what that should be. Why don't we jump into girls MIAA? How could we forget about the MIAA? You were at a game on Monday night. Methuen Tewksbury, how about them?
Yeah, I mean, talk about a mouthful. Methuen Tewksbury beats down Shawsheen Bedford Lowell in the Merrimack Valley County League matchup.
5 towns.
Shawsheen is multiple towns, right? Isn't it? With being the tech school?
Oh, yeah, you're right. I forgot it was Shawsheen Tech. You're 100% right.
Yeah. And then you have like the 2 conferences combined in the one with the Merrimack Valley and Duke County League. Man, co-ops galore. But hey, whatever you got to do to play, right? So Methuen Tewksbury, they 4-1 win. Shawsheen scored super early in that game with Becca Sobel. But I mean, like, gosh, it could have been 4-1 after the end of the first. It could have been 4-1 at the end of the second. Somehow it was 1-1 at the end of the second. Elise McEachern was really good through the first 2 periods for the Rams. I was really impressed with Methuen. Well-rounded defense. Lila Chapman was someone who was really impressive last year, and she's kind of found another level this year. She's a UMass Lowell soccer commit. Their top 2 lines can move. They have skill. They have size. And we know Lydia Barnes, one of the best goalies in the state. So they're 9-0. They also beat Haverhill, Pentucket, North Andover. They beat Billerica at Chelmsford. Those are 3 in a row, really quality wins, and they outscored those teams 7-1 in those 3 games. And they've only allowed 3 goals all season. So just, again, Methuen Tewksbury is legit. Then you get into, Algonquin-Hudson, who is not a team we have mentioned once this season. They haven't even been in the hunt in my rankings. That is completely my fault because they're 10-0-0, and they were, it's been 5 days since the last, the first power rankings from the MIAA came out. So pretty much their version of JSPR. They were number one in the Division I power rankings. So we got to give them their flowers. I'm sure we'll get to them a little more. We'll have our midseason reports coming out. But they've got Maddie Glynn as a senior, Addie Kagan. They've been Addie Kagan, the goalie, Maddie Glynn up front. They've been, really good senior leaders. Their top pair's been strong. They've got a pretty big young freshman class that's been productive. My question for them, and again, mid-season report will be coming out in the next few weeks or so, whenever that comes out. But they've got Natick, they've got Pope, who they've already beat. They've got NDA. Oh, they've also already beat Natick, I believe. And they got Bishop Fian. They've got Waltham. They've got, Westford, or it's either Westford or Westwood. I may have written it down wrong. Those are some litmus tests I've got my eye on for Algonquin Hudson. 10-0-0 is legit. So we'll see how things shake out for them over the next month.
We will. And what's funny is like with MIAA, there will often be teams on the boys' side that are like 8-0-0, 10-0-0. And I look at who they played and I'm like, I don't know if I can justify putting them in the rankings, but it sounds like Algonquin Hudson has played some legit teams.
It's not a murderer's row, but there are quality wins there. Like Shrewsbury is, not a world beater, but they're solid. Same like Natick is kind of been hanging around in the hunt for the rankings. Pope Francis is another one that's kind of in that next tier outside the top 10 for our rankings. So I mean, that NDA game will obviously be huge. But if they can beat Natick a second time, if they can beat Pope a second time, they've beaten Shrewsbury twice already. Just got interested to see how they fare here.
And then you have Bishop Fian and Archies. Those are two teams that I know that you've had your eye on quite a bit this year too.
Yeah, I mean, Archies, we had them too coming into the year, and it just, hasn't really gone their way here. They're 4-5, I think. We kind of looked at them as maybe there's some bounce back opportunities coming out of the Tenny Cup. They lose to Bishop Stang, who I think is also primed for another deep run. They made the D1 finals as kind of a Cinderella last year, and then they lose to Fian. And that brings us to Fian, who, after a pretty rough Tenny Cup, and then they come out and lose to St. Mary's, who is also looking really good again. Once again, St. Mary's is a top 10 team in the MIAA. Stop me if you heard that before. Fian, it's 1-goal loss to St. Mary's. They come back, they beat Arlington Catholic, who, was a tough out. They beat Archies 3-0. So just keep it there. Both of those teams, Fian and Archies, 4-5, kind of interested to see which directions their seasons go from here.
Absolutely. Big one. Duxbury loses twice this week, but then they bounce back with a win.
Yeah, we'll have our new rankings out later this week.
Don't spoil it. You got to pay for that. You don't spoil that for
it. Duxbury was number one. We'll see if they stay after losing twice. They lose to Nauset Monomoy. They lose to Westwood. And then they bounce back with an overtime win over Canton. Addie Harrington scored there. The big takeaway here is Westwood is legit. Livy Hicks scored both goals against Duxbury. They're a team that, kind of like Algonquin Hudson, kind of in that Pembroke, who was in our last rankings. One of those teams that maybe we overlooked coming into the year. They lose a handful of players to graduation. Liz Levering goes to prep. Just question marks there, but the returning cast and the youngsters that have stepped up have been really good. They've beaten Medfield, who, reigning D2 champs. They look like they could also make another run again. Their lone losses to Hingham. No shame in losing to Hingham. That you beat, and then you turn some heads with a win over Duxbury. And they're a team they've been consistent. Hingham's the only game where they've given up more than one goal. They're, averaging, if I had to do some quick math, probably around like 4 goals a game.
Ooh.
Yeah. 5-0, 5-0, 6-1, 5-0, lose to Hingham 4-1, 5-1, 4-1, 2-1. So they have
someone check that math.
Someone add that up for me. I don't have the total goals in front of me, or else I could do the math a lot quicker for you. But if ballpark it, they're playing well on both sides of the puck. And that Duxbury win really just kind of says, hey, watch out for Westwood.
A lot of math today.
Ton
I
of
don't
math.
like this. I don't like that.
We'll
Boys
wrap up
MIA. Yeah.
Yep.
Get off.
St. John's Shrewsbury, fresh off heartbreak last season. They are legit once again. They had a big week.
Huge week, about as big a week as you can have in the MIA. I don't know if this has been beaten in my years doing this, but they beat CM, they beat St. John's Prep, they beat Zavarian, all in a 7-day stretch. I was at this one against St. John's Prep, obviously 5-1 win. That's a huge W for St. John Shrewsbury. Historically, St. John Shrewsbury's always been a team that kind of tails off a little bit in the middle of the season. When they face those Catholic Conference teams, they fall off. We saw that last year where they were really inconsistent. They enter the tournament as a low seed, then they get hot. They will not be a low seed in this tournament. I don't think so. For me, like it's similar to sort of what I went back to with Tabor. They have really good forwards, but they're decor, man. Ryder Bisson, Kevin Bisson, they're brothers. They play together, which is obviously awesome. Connor Seacrest, who's a moose, Navy baseball commit. This kid is huge, 6'3". You know him from the baseball side. Like
I do.
Hits. Oh my God. J.R. Goldstein is great defensive for St. John's Prep. Skates puck over the blue line, cuts middle, kind of has his head down. And I was like, oh no. And those are two big boys. Thankfully for Goldstein, he picked his head up at the last second and like kind of avoided it. But oh my God, that would have been that would have registered on the Richter scale if that.
And that's
if
like
the
your
CT
classic MIAA big defenseman open ice hit.
Yeah, it is.
Those are the freaking best.
Yeah.
Obviously not when you or I were in the games, but
correct. Yes. But like that is, to see it's great. But thankfully for Goldstein, he avoided it. But at any rate, Colin McCarthy looks fantastic in that. I saw him against St. John's Prep. Kid has poise, and he's big, and he's so square to pucks. And I think when it comes down to it, we try to highlight hot. We try to figure out who's going to be the hot goalie in the MIA tournament, because that's what it really is. Who has the better goalie usually is the team that wins. He's damn good, and so St. John Shrewsbury's, again, they're going to have all these Catholic Conference teams again. But their first run through the big dogs, also, Pat, we talk, on the girls' side, and we talked about this with Prep, who are the top teams? To me, it's pretty defined. Like, I still have CM as my number one team. I know St. John Shrewsbury beat them. I still have them number one. I know the MIAA boys hockey rankings that they put out came out January 9th, I believe.
yes.
And they had Zavarian 1. And now I've not seen Zavarian yet. That's hopefully going to change this weekend. I still would have CM over Zavarian. And Zavarian started out great. They just obviously lost St. John Shrewsbury. It was their first loss of the season. But to me, it's CM, St. John Shrewsbury, Zavarian. That's your top three. St. John's Prep is 4. They're in a kind of a weird spot. Like, they're winning games, but they've tied and lost a couple that the St. John's Shrewsbury one comes to mind, where it's like they're at the bottom of the top tier. Usually they're up at the top tier, not at the bottom of the top tier. And then you get into some of the other teams, which we'll get to in a bit. But to me, those are your top teams right now.
Yeah, you touched on CM. You mentioned they're still your top team. Any overarching thoughts there?
Not really. I mean, I think they beat St. John's Prep, which was a huge litmus test. That was I wasn't there, but shout out to Phil Stacy of the Salem News was texting me updates on Sunday, like what was happening. I was like, oh, I feel like I was there. But look, I mean, we've said this before, they have a lot of skill up front. James Baker's having a fantastic season. I think he has 9 points so far this year on D. He's been as good as advertised, if not better. And Fleming's been great in net. Like, they're another team. You mentioned the midseason reports, which will be coming out soon. Like, they have a legit shot at repeating. Like, and it's hard to repeat in this because you can just have a bad game in the Elite Eight and your season's over. But that roster, man, I don't know. No, I'm not gonna say it, but like that's a damn good roster.
We've talked about plenty of the usual suspects already. One we haven't is Pope Francis, and they're stuck in a rut right now.
Yeah, they're usually a team up at the top. They're 5-4-2. They've struggled of late. You look at some of they lost to St. John's Prep 3-2 in the Frady's Winter Classic Championship, but that happens. You tie MC, there you go, Pat. Tie Malden Catholic 5-5.
Oh, yeah.
Lost to Arlington 2-1 in OT. Beat Franklin 3-0, but then lost to St. Mary's Lynn 7-3. So they're going to have a little bit of an uphill climb. They have Archie's and they have Braintree, Archie's again, Shrewsbury, and then they have Hingham to round out January. One thing that's interesting about Pope, this is projecting, and I might be way off on this. But if they kind of continued on this path and they were like a 10 seed, I don't want to face them. Like when we do our sleepers, like, and again, a lot could change between now and end of February, but like that team could shape out to be a really hard out in the tournament because they're a lower seed than where they normally are, which is in the top 3. So interesting to see if they can get back on track. They have the talent to do it, but it just comes down to whether or not they can, and they've been a little inconsistent of late.
2 more usual suspects, especially with the Publics. We talked about this game a little bit already. Hingham and Arlington, you were there, cutting it close with the Patriots, but it didn't matter. It was still a great game.
It was, yeah, and it was worth it. I will say, I didn't tell anybody this. Kind of had 2-1 Hingham in my head before going to the game.
Ooh.
Just want to say, I had it in my head. I was
Genius.
thinking it. Didn't say it. Didn't text you. Didn't text anybody about it. But I had it. I came away from that. I think Hingham's the top Public right now. I think it is between them and Arlington. And then you have Reading, who Arlington just beat 4-0. And you have Winchester, who beat Arlington, but just lost to someone. I forget. Oh, lost to Hingham. I think 7-1. So, like, those are your 4 Publics to me that are jockeying for space in that top 10. Hingham to me is the top team in that. I like James Whitmore a lot in that on Sunday. Super athletic, rangy, made some huge saves. And they're another one. They have a really good decor. They're good up front. Zavik, I believe his name is really skilled. One of the most skilled players I've seen in the state this winter. So to me, like, when I look at like which Public, and I wrote about this in the midseason report, which again will be out very soon. You guys can see it. I think Hingham might have the best shot right now of the Publics to take down those teams up top. Arlington can do it. Winchester could do it. Reading could do it. But like, if you had to pick one right now, to me, it's Hingham. Hingham has consistently pretty much taken care of business so far. And their losses have been close. So to me, like, Hingham is right there.
Yeah. And I think we'll find out a lot about these teams at the Ed Burns Coffee Pot in a couple weeks.
That's right. You go to the Ed Burns Coffee Pot. We split them up, which is nice. Yeah, it was Walter Zavik. I have the roster in front of me now. I wanted to make sure I had that right. But and they're deep up. They're deep in the top 6, and that's no disrespect to anybody else. I just think of the Publics right now, to me, it's Hingham. So
yeah. So I got a little sidetracked trying to find my math on Westwood, and I think I was pretty close.
There you go.
Almost 4.
I like that. All right. Yes. Do we have time for overtime? We do not. Okay. No overtime this week. Sorry, everybody. Sorry, guys.
It'll just be even better next week.
Yeah. Yes. You'll have an extra week to prepare.
That's exciting. That makes sense.
Yeah. An interesting stuff.
Everyone, we're up against the clock. There'll be an exciting version of overtime in the next episode.
Hell yeah. Well, that's RinkWise this week. You can see Pat and I in Rinks. If you have any complaints, direct them to Pat. That's RinkWise. Patrick Donnelly. I'm Evan Marinofsky. We'll see you at the Rinks.